Hi, I'm Dirk Hansen. I'm glad you could join me for the show today. Now, I had an email the other day from a lady in Iowa that had bought one of my prints, this one particularly. It's called Morning Reflections, and I've done it years ago. And she said, oh, I really love it. It's had such a good atmosphere, such a nice mood. And I said, I paint a little bit myself. Would it be okay if I copy it? I said, no, Beckers, of course. But then it got me thinking. I thought, I get requests like that every once in a while. And I thought, well, let's take a segment of this show and go over this whole process. What do I do? How do I come up with ideas? And what do I do for research? And what you can adapt for that to do your own paintings of that type. I will take you along on the trip that I took several years ago to the Lake of the Woods area. It's the border area between northern Minnesota and Canada. It's a huge, huge wilderness area, and there's a lot of wildlife and a lot of interesting things to see. A friend of mine had a lodge up there on a little island, and so he was gracious enough to let me use his pontoon boat. So I went out and I was cruising around in the back bays and taking in all this wildlife and got the camera rolling and got myself some really, really interesting footage, and I'd like to share that with you. It was late June. The loons had their babies, and I was looking specifically really for some information on loons too. I mean, the loon is a Minnesota state bird, and over the years I've painted dozens of them. But there's always something that you're looking for, always something that you haven't seen before, and like I say, timing was right, the babies were out, and I spent almost 2 weeks up there. Anyway, so let me get you started on this whole idea, how I come up with a painting of that type and what went into the construction of it, what went into the research of it, and my color theory and the little liberties that any artist will take by creating a piece like that. So anyway, let's put up a canvas and we'll get going on it. So first thing we're going to have to do after we had the idea, and I had to get it from my head onto a little sketch and onto the canvas. So what I did is I prepared a little rough sketch that I will use as the basic guideline for the painting. Normally I don't really do this, but I start working right away because I'm changing my mind a million times right in the middle of the practice. Anyway, forget about the loon. For right now. Right now, we're just going to work up the idea about the painting. Now, as I mentioned earlier, when I'm out in the field, a lot of times I see things that I'm filing away somewhere in my head, or if I happen to be lucky enough, I had the video camera going. But in this particular instance, it was an early morning situation with a fog coming off the water, and I was on the edge of the lake, and there was a light coming in that really intrigued the heck out of me. So that kind of stuck in my mind. Of course, there was no loon in it, but a lot of times that's what it takes. You have this little impression, and that develops into an idea for a painting. So then what I do, I'll take a pad and a pencil, nothing fancy, and I make a couple of really, really small sketches. And those are not sketches that give me detail or anything. What I'm trying to find out is how many different values of paint I'm going to be using to get to the distance of the painting from the foreground, to the distance. So I'm making just a very small sketch, and that's where the word thumbnail comes from. And all of it square, and it's very abstract actually. I'm dividing my painting into the different areas of where where my value scale is going to be. Now, the horizon line sits up a little high. So what I'm doing, and as I developed this over the years, if I have a lighter value, I keep my strokes a little farther apart. If I got more value, I put them closer together. So like I say, it's only to lay down of what type of value I'm going to be using for the different color families that we have to create on the palette as I lay this out. So we have the distant trees. That is my distant line. So we're also going to have a reflection in the water. And then we have the middle ground, which comes together a little closer. And we're going to have some tree trunks in there. And we got another tree trunk back here. And really, that's basically all that's taking place in these little thumbnail sketches. It doesn't mean a whole hell of a lot, but for an artist, you're going to, somehow you have to begin to structure your picture. Otherwise, you're going to do all that experiment later on when you have paint on it, and that could turn into some very disastrous things. Anyway, so what I know now is, first of all, as you notice in this lighting situation, I don't have a sky. Leave the sky out in the sky area, but I do have a sky down in this area. So my reflection from the background will be just a tad darker than actually, because there's maybe some murky water, that's what. So let's not get too technical, let's just get started. Anyway, I have my background, I have my middle distance, I don't have an immediate foreground, but the reflection of my middle ground will end up in here. So I have my trees in there, and now they have one light area, and then of course that light area is really where I'm going to put the bird. Because it's a dark bird, I don't want to put it directly in front of a dark background, so I need to create a lighted area where I can set the bird, and then I'm going to bring in some water lilies. And basically, that is my little thumbnail sketch. Sometime I do several of them to come up with an idea, but I keep it very abstract and very little work, because you want to go and very spontaneously. You know, I don't like to go and start sketching out, you know, start eyeballs and feathers. I've done it. Don't do it. Anyway, so I have this little sketch. So I prepared a little larger one here, just on a piece of paper. So I kind of know now, this is my distant background, and no sky. It's just two different values there. My trees, my middle ground, put in some rocks. And also what I'm going to be doing is I'm going to have you look into the water, and there'll be some fallen tree trunks or something in there. It creates a very nice pattern, but also is the rhythm of the picture itself. We're looking from the light coming from this area. It goes hits here. This will stop your eyes, and it will turn you around, and you're going to go back in here. Now you're reaching the point where the reflections are in the water, and now the tree trunks are coming out. So you have this S shape of rhythm going through your picture, and you anchor your main focus point right within that triangle. It's going to be a pretty interesting composition. I did something else, which again I normally don't do, but I wanted to explain to you the color families that will have to be created in order to make this painting convincing as far as the lighting situation is concerned, and give it this really dramatic feeling, which also has to be very serene at the same time. So by having a very dramatic lighting effect without a lot of action makes it very interesting. So let me just show you this here. Now, again, I created just the sketch. So now we can see which color families we have to create. Now remember, on the thumbnail sketch that this is my distant, but they're not really that far back. In another painting, they may be the middle value, the middle distance. But my lighting, that is the important part. That is what's going to create the drama, is the lighting right here. Now, this is the morning fog. It's very quiet in there. And you can hear some birds, and maybe you'll hear a loon in the background. It's to me, as the artist, it sank into my mind because it was a very dramatic and very relaxing situation at the same time. So anyway, here we got our middle ground, and now the middle ground also becomes the foreground as well. So it becomes a little darker. But now we have the sky. So I did this particular one here, and now what I have to do is I have my reflections in the water. There also will be the shadows. This is the part where your eye is going to stop from leaving the picture. So you're going into this picture from here. This is where you'll be drawn in. You're getting over here. It stops your eyes from moving out of the picture, and now you're going back in here, and this is the area where the loon will be, sitting in front of the reflection of the sky. This actually is what I want to create, and it works out pretty good. I did try another one beforehand, and that one I kind of left the tall trees out. Nah, it just really didn't hit my hot button. And again, normally I really don't go through that much work. I mean, I start painting, and over the years I've developed a technique that I can make my changes on the fly. But anyway, so now the next thing that we're going to do is I have prepared my canvas. Now, I always tone my canvas in a middle value gray, sometime on the warm side, sometime on the cool side, depending upon what feeling I'm going to create. Because overall, I love to work with really unique lighting situations. Sometimes going from dark to light, going from light to dark, something dramatic. What I've found over the years of painting all this stuff, you know, it catches the viewer's eye, and after all, as an artist painting pictures for a living, I have to come up with ideas that catches the people, and hopefully they buy it. So I have developed this technique, and again, here I got the full sketch. As you noticed, I left the loon out because I'm not absolutely sure exactly where the loon's going to end up. So it really doesn't matter. Don't let yourself be bound by the sketches that you do. If, oh man, I really want to change it. Don't even think about it. You know, you're in charge. So if you want to leave this tree out, fine. Leave that tree out, fine. Add another one to it. But it doesn't matter. You're the one that is creating this piece, and you're absolutely, totally in charge. Whatever you say goes. So again, I leave the loon out because actually, let me put it this way. It's a loon painting, but the loon itself is actually just part of the thing. You know, it's not a, like I always like to say, eyeballs and feathers. You know, the loon is part of the landscape. I think, to me, that creates a believable situation. Now, if you have, and I'm not going against what other artists do. You know, I'm me, they're them. If you want to have just a great big loon, that's wonderful. You can show the viewers how much you know about the loon, or how accurate you can paint, or how accurate you can copy, photograph, or whatever. But it doesn't tell a story. And so when I create a painting, like I did with Morning Reflections, I like to create an atmosphere. And what that goes back to is, you know, you would like the viewer to be part of, or become part of, what you saw. Like, meaning to say that probably, you know, this picture of yours is a window to your world. And if you open the window in the right way, the potential viewer will look through it and see what you saw. And that is the accomplishment in a painting. Rather than just make a statement of, oh God, great composition and great color values and everything, all the technical pieces are very, very accurate. But it's not saying anything. So again, that is the way I feel as an artist. Everybody sees things differently. I know dozens of other artists that would totally disagree with me, and that's fine. You know, that's what makes art art. I like what I like, and you are the customer, or another artist, you like what you like, but we can all learn from each other. And so again, going back to this dramatic lighting situation, and in this particular instance, I did something else. I made some columns on the side here that I would lay out for you as we create the color families. It makes it a little easier to understand of actually what's going to take place. So why don't we get started on that? I'm going to set up the palette now that we know basically what we're going to paint. I'll set up the palette, and then we'll move it up here, and then we'll literally start painting. Now I'm going to be working with a very limited selection of color. I don't really like to lay out all these paints when I already know basically what I'm going to be working with. You know, a lot of times I like to restrict my palette. It keeps me from getting confused. You know, if you know you're going to use red, well, lay out red. If you know, and all these colors in between. That is why you do a little color study if you can as well. So you know what paints are you going to be using? Anyway, my layout will be such, and I'm going to lay these colors out on the side up here too. It's a little easier for you to see. And I'm going to start out, I'm using an ultramarine blue. Let's say we lay that in the first square right here. That's going to be my dark color. Then we're going to use a cadmium red medium. Our cadmium red medium is probably the closest color on the color spectrum to a pure red. So we're going to lay that up here. And then I'm going to use a little bit of yellow ochre because I'm going to have a lot of warm tones in there. And I need them for the sunlight in the morning. It's really yellow. And I need to warm up all my greens that are hit by the sunlight. So I'm going to lay a yellow ochre there. And I'm also going to be needing a cadmium yellow medium for some of the other lighter areas. So I'm going to lay that up here. And I add white. So now we got basically, this is the palette that I'm going to be working with. Having said that, that is the basic palette. Now, as you develop your color families, you might find the need to bring in some earth tones or bring in some other colors. You know, there is not really a set formula of doing the things, except that you always got to remember you're going to have blue, you're going to have yellow, and you're going to have red. Those are the primary colors. And everything you can that you can see, you should be able to mix from that. Not everybody does, but you can, including the earth tones. And so again, you know, some artists that I've talked to over the years, they lay out this whole palette, and it's wonderful. But at the same time, you may not use all this stuff. And they say, well, you know, it's like playing the piano. You're going to have all the notes out there that you can really make the music. And well, you know, if you want to play a song, if you want to compose a song, yeah, you don't need all the notes. But if you already know the song, there's only certain notes you're going to use, and it's really the same in the painting, you know. So anyway, as you can see you see the very little edges up here. So let me draw this down just a little bit so you can see better. So now that I know I'm going to be working with a limited palette, because I got to create greens, I got to create some darks, and I'm going to have to create the warm for the sky. For that, I'm going to need some yellow and some reds. So I have a limited palette set up, and basically what I did is I laid them out on top here so you can actually see them. So we have ultramarine blue, we have cadmium red medium, a yellow ochre, cadmium yellow medium, and white to start with. If we need something else later on, if we change our mind or whatever, we'll add it to it. But so now let's go and create what we have to do. I'm going to mix them on my palette, and then I'm going to bring them up here. So the first thing we're going to do, I'm going to create my foreground colors. Now, since I said earlier, my actual landmass is going to be my middle value already. So as it comes to the foreground, it will get darker. So I'm going to start on that. And people say, well, I don't know how to paint water. Well, look at water as a clear body. And what it does, it reflects what is right around it. Now you could have a little murky water or iron in it, or you could have algae in it, whatever. You know, it changes a little bit. But think of it as a clear body. And whatever surrounds it is in it. So sometimes when you paint water, whatever you see, sky, trees, put it in the water and it becomes believable. So again, there's not really a formula because all the surroundings are all different all the time. So anyway, I'm going to go and create my dark foreground color. I use ultramarine blue, and then I'm going to add cadmium red medium to it, and which will create a purple, a really deep purple. Now, if you're not sure on how purple it is, let me put it up here so we can see. Now, this would be now my foreground color. See, it's a pretty dark color, and so if I'm not sure what exactly if I'm not sure exactly how dark it is, and I'm not sure whether it's too purple or too blue, take a tiny little bit of white and just put it in there. So now we'll see, well, it's a bluish purple. Well, I want it to be a little bit redder, so I'm going to stick a little more red into it. And now that it is purple, well, I also have to, since everything, it's in the woods, so everything has pine trees and other leaf trees and shrubbery, and so I know it's going to be green, basically. I don't want to use a really, really cold green, because the pines that are up there, they're Norway pines, they're green, but they're warm green. And the tree trunks are almost a sienna color. So we have to keep that in mind. So when we're going to create this color family in the front of the painting, in the reflections. So I'm going to take a little yellow ochre and I stick it in there with it. And that gives me a little bit of a really murky green, which is absolutely perfect. Well, so now that I have created my first darks, and I adjusted it a little bit, I added a little more of the yellow ochre to it to make it, relate to all the trees and all this. So now this is going to be my dark in the foreground. And since it goes already into the middle value, now I'm going to have to create this particular color family. And since all the rest of it is going to be reflected in the water, I can go now to my middle value and create what I need to create there. So my what you would consider a local color for the pine trees, I'll take my darks, and I'm going to go to my cadmium yellow medium, and I create a nice green. So now this would be with my darker background. That you will see how these colors are going to relate to each other. Very important. Now I have the green, and I want to bring it up just a tad lighter, just a little bit. Not much. And I also like to establish the first little bit of a distance, because for where you're standing right here, you're looking already in the distance. Now remember what my idea was. It was morning reflection. It was early morning light coming through, fog on the water. That means you will have a little bit of fog between yourself and my middle distance already. So I did add just a hint of white, and I'm going to lay that next to it, and you can see there's a little bit of a value difference already. Now you can also go and mix up, which is a good way to learn about atmospheric perspective. But I normally don't like to go into it that deep, not on a painting that is shallow like this. When you have farther distance to look into, atmospheric perspective takes a major role in whether or not you can convincingly lay down the color and create the feeling of them. But since we have morning fog in here, you could also then go and create a fog color. So it's kind of a hazy gray. So why don't we go ahead and do that? So we'll take a little bit of the white, and we're going to add just a little tad of the blue to it. So we get kind of bluish, grayish. You can add a little bit of the red. Now it warms it up just a little bit. But we'll say, okay, now this is our atmosphere. Why don't I give this, lay it right under the white, because that is like the next light color. Now, when you go and you mix your first greens, your local color for the pine trees, in the middle, let's call it the middle foreground. So now we have a green that we want to use here. And now, in order to bring a little bit of distance into it, we'll take just a little bit of our atmosphere and we add it to it. Just a very, very little bit. So now we take our local green, and again, there are very few really pure colors out there. So I always like to create a murky color. Everything is influenced by the outside light, by dust, by whatever. So no real pure color. Then what that will do for you, if you are really then want to pop something out and you lay a pure color over the top of it, it just jumps. And it's very important because you want to sometimes create this point of interest simply with a very bright color note. And you will see it later on as we get into the actual painting. So, but what I will do for you, I will work from layer to layer to layer into the distance, and we create the color families accordingly. So anyway, now we got this murky green, and this is our local color. And since this is in the middle foreground, it's not heavily hit by any light at this point, except for the light that's coming from the sky, but it's not hit by direct sunlight. So it really stays dark. Now, the next step, what we would need is we need a color for the tree trunks. And again, there I'm going back to my dark purple, my first color here. And I'm going to add more red. I lay it on the side. And then I'm going to, since the trees really would kind of be almost an earth tone. So I go back to my yellow ochre, which is more of a subdued yellow. And I create a little bit of a between the cadmium red medium and the yellow ochre, I create kind of an orange tone. But I have to tone that down a little bit with my purple because I want to create an earth tone, but I don't want it to jump out at me. So again, here we have this local color, and I'm going to lay this in here. So now I'm going to go back with a little more of my original dark, and I'm going to mix that in. So see how murky it gets in comparison to where it was? So this is going to be my local color for the pine tree. And now we're going to have to create a little bit of in the same color family, in the same distance here, the color for the rocks. And up there, most of the rocks are granite. And the granite is basically a gray color with, probably lichen growing on it and those kind of things. So it has a whole bunch of different color notes on it, but the basic color is kind of it's gray. So now, again, I'm going back to, I keep my little color from the trees, but I'm going to add a little more of my murky purple to it. And then I'm going to add a little more of the white. And now I can see that I have still a little bit of a purplish gray, but it's a cool gray. So I'm going to add a little more of the yellow ochre to it. Yep, but that didn't work too well, so we're going to have to add a little more of the red. We'll kill that. So now we're going to lay this gray next to that. So if you take both of these now and you mix them together, you can play around with it and you end up with this warm gray that you can move around on these rocks. And again, now we're only going to have the local colors. The local colors, normally I can break them up into 3 different segments. There'd be the local color and the lighted area where light hits it, not direct light, just light. And the shaded areas, which that turn around getting into the shadow. It's the same on the pine trees, it's the same on the tree trunks, and it's the same on the rocks. So now we have that. And now we have to go into the next step of the atmospheric perspective. Now we're going into the distance. You have to remember that when you work with the middle distance or you work with the immediate foreground, it doesn't matter. Whatever you see here, whatever color is here, if, say, for instance, you would have a pine tree right in here. Now, I'm working with the reflections in the water. But so let's step up and say, okay, this is my middle ground. The pine trees that are here, later on, you will see branches hanging in there. That is the local color. Now, these pine trees back here, unless they are an entirely different tree, if it is the same pine tree, you have to remember that now you're beginning to look through the morning fog. The color of these pine trees is exactly the same color, local color, as the pine trees right here. But you're looking through the fog, that makes them a little cooler and a little lighter. So we can actually work from our colors here and go and add our light, our fog color, our atmosphere. So we're going to take this and we make it this greenish a little lighter. And probably make that a little, see, it depends on how far you want to go into the distance. If this particular picture here, the channel that goes into the back here, it's not really that far back. So it's not that much of a distance. So you don't have to go and put a lot of the atmosphere into it. The more atmosphere you put into it, the farther back it appears to be. So anyway, this is basically what we have going. Now we're going to have some tree trunks shown through there as well. So then what we're going to do, we are going to take our atmosphere here a little more and take a little bit off the tree trunks, and we're going to make that a little lighter here. So we're just making these color notes so you understand what is taking place as far as the atmosphere is concerned. And then we have the same with the rocks. We're going to take a little bit more of that and we're going to bring it in here. And maybe you say, well, that's going to look pretty light. Well, you will find once you got your toned canvas here, that establishes your middle value, and you can immediately see how light or how dark your colors are going to be in accordance to what you want to paint. If you had a completely white canvas, you'd be constantly wrestling with covering up the white so you can see what your colors are looking like. So it is a good idea to start with a middle value and then work into the dark and come up with the light. That's what I've found. So I hope it makes sense to you. But anyway, so we have this, we have our middle foreground and our distance. So we're actually doing already pretty good. So what we want to do now is we want to create the sky reflections that we have now in the foreground here. And then I will show you how this all comes together, no problem at all. I think you will not be able to understand and sit down and do the same type of painting and use this procedure, and you will come up with a pretty decent result, I guarantee you. So anyway, now we do have a sky above us. Since we are not going to see sky in the background here, we're dealing with a reflection of the sky that is almost directly over our head. And I've seen many, many times that that the artists don't take under consideration that the sky that is reflected in the distance generally is cooler and lighter than it would be right above your head. You could have a cloud on top of your head that would reflect right in the water by your feet, and you could have a very light sky in the background, but if it is blocked in by the trees, it won't reflect that much. So keep in mind. Let me show you. There's something that would work actually pretty quick. Give you an idea. If you would look at draw yourself an arch, okay? This is the plane that you're standing on. Say you're standing by the water, and this is the arch of the sky, and you're standing right here. Excuse me. So you can tell that the reflections, whatever the sky is going to be in the sections here, that is what it's going to be reflecting in the water. And if you got dark blue sky over right there, that is what's going to reflect in the water. So it will not reflect what's way back here. So if you would reflect the sky, the light sky here, it would make your piece look very shallow. It would not have any depth to it. So you got to keep that in mind. This is how reflections on the water work. And this, when you stand there, you know, the light will come straight down onto the water. If the light doesn't take under consideration where you're standing, this is just a reflection on the water. That is what's taking place. So anyway, thought you might want to file that away in your mind. I hope I'm not confusing you too much here. Anyway, we need to then create this light that is reflecting in the water that also will give us the surface of where the loon eventually is going to be floating, whether it's going to be here or there or there. We'll figure that out later on. Let's just create the landscape first. And we create the light source. So what I'm going to be doing here is I'm going to take some white. Excuse me. I'm going to take some white. And I'm going to make it orange. So I'm going to take some red. I'm going to take some yellow ochre. And build a little bit of an orange. And if it stays too red, add a little bit of the yellow ochre to it. And then let me put this Sven back here with the light. So we have that in, remember, we have that in foreground. This is reflecting not too far away from you, the light that's over your head. So this would be my basic reflection color. Now, of course, now we're going to have to add to it. But what I don't like to do is, I don't like to start mixing this medium value and then start add white to it. Pretty soon you have this humongous pile of paint laying right by you. You say, okay, well, I got enough here. I'll probably paint about 5 of these things, you know. So I take a little bit of white, and I'm going to add this color to it. I also now can see where this is all leading, whether it is too red or whether it is too yellow. And I'm coming up with a pretty good mixture. So I'm going to lay that against this here. So it will be a combination of that. Now, there also could be some clouds in the sky. No, entirely possible, isn't it? So now we could go and take a little bit again. I take a little bit of an atmosphere, and we're going to add that to it too. So draw that down. What it will do, it would just gray it out a little bit. So these are all the little things that take place in the reflection in the water. Now, one more important thing I will also, when you paint a scene of this type, it's very important to understand that when you want to make your colors lighter, technically you can add white and maybe the next color of the color wheel, and you kind of build up your colors until you get to the light where you want to be. But important thing is, you're trying to paint a scene out in nature. And we have determined that it's going to be a morning scene, and there's going to be some very direct light in the back of the trees. And in the morning, the colors are quite yellow. So if you ever have a chance, get up early in the morning if you can. I normally don't, unless I'm on a job somewhere. I want to paint this particular scene. Anyway, you go out and watch it, and watch the sun come up. Don't look where the sun is shining. Look where what the sun is shining on. That's important. And you all of a sudden see say for instance, a tree trunk that during the day will be yellow. Will be gray. Now this morning light shines on it. It has a yellow tint to it. So it changes its color quality completely. And that's what makes it interesting, because you got to remember that the local color is what you see, and the light that hits it will be the morning light. Sometime it could be if there are any clouds in the sky, or fog, or they have wildfire burning somewhere, you got smog. Again, changes the colors. But in general, it will be a yellow tint. Now, that will tell you that whatever is hit by that particular light should have yellow in it. So rather than lightening up your reflection with white and taking the chance of have it turn chalky on you, take a little bit of white and add either cadmium yellow, a medium to it, or yellow ochre, but make it kind of a yellowish tinge. So let me show you how I do it. Again, I still got a little white laying on the palette here, so I'm going to take white, and I like, for the morning light, we want it to be yellow. So I'm taking the cadmium yellow medium and add that to it. So now we can say, okay, this is the light source. So I'm going to lay that next to my reflection. See, let me show you the difference. What we have, it's a creamy yellow. So if you lay it next to the white, you can tell the difference. So whatever is going to be hit by the direct sunlight, it's going to have yellow in it. A rule of thumb, an artist told me a long time ago, that I go by, if it is hit by sunlight, got yellow in it. If it is in the shadow, got blue in it. Makes sense to me. If it is in the shadow, don't get hit directly by sunlight, it usually reflects the sky. Say the sky, as a general rule, is blue, so it has blue in it. That's how it reflects. It's a very simple rule of thumb, but if you keep it in mind, a lot of times it helps you out of a bind. Anyway, so now we're going to have our darks, our local color in the middle distance, a local color in the tree trunks, local color of the rocks, reflection in the water, our sunlight, our fog, and we have our color family for the middle distance. We have a murky green, our rock color, our tree trunk color, and our rock color. Now, one adjustment that I like to make here, and I look at that thing, you know, I like it to be a little greener, maybe not quite that murky. So I'm going to go back to my cadmium yellow medium and the green that I had already mixed, and freshen up the green just a little bit. So that will give me enough of the green that I will need in order to work with this whole thing. So these are the color families that are going to be needing basically for this painting. Don't look like a whole lot. So again, you know, no sense of laying out all of these colors to make the manufacturers happy that you're using up a lot of paint. You know, a lot of times it really helps if you plan what you're going to do. Now, if you had now a painting that have several distant layers, you end up with a collection probably, you have a color family for each distant layer. So if you have a foreground, a middle ground, and maybe in secondary middle ground, and a distance, and a really far distance, and all of a sudden you have all these colors laid out. But you want to do this because it keeps you from having to experiment. You can experiment on the palette, but once you make a decision, put it down and leave it. You can always make adjustments, but you got to trust your judgment, and this is what you want to do, then you're going to do it. if you into the painting and you find, oh man, this is really not going to work out for me, well, then make some changes. But go onto the piece of work with a clear vision of what you want to accomplish. So anyway, now we can actually go ahead and literally start the painting. So I'm going to get some brushes ready, and we're in business. Go get yourself a cup of coffee maybe or something before we get started. Well, okay, now we're going to get serious about this whole thing. One thing that I did not do, and we have to go take a quick step back here. Remember, on our distant colors, the local color of the pine trees, the tree trunks, the rocks, the water, we're also going to have to create a darker color. Not a shadow, not a deep shadow, but a darker color as well. So I took the very same dark that I had for the foreground, added a little bit of cadmium yellow medium to it, and the purplish color, and we'll create this dark color because we need some color variation of. So anyway, here we see this particular color in that color family. If you wanted to see what it looks like here, so go back and take a little bit of that and lay it against that, and now you can see the difference, what that makes between the local color and a little bit of a shaded area. And then we can start working overall, and then what that will allow you to do, you can play around and balance the values. There's some pine trees a little more in the distance. We've got to go in even a little lighter on that. But then I'll show you how to bring all this stuff in front to the water. But at that point, we don't want to have to do too much mixing right in this light area because we're going to need that later on. We want to blend in the colors, and I'll show how that's done. As a medium, for all of my painting, I use a liquid. It's an alkali product. Any good art store will have it. I use it all the way through the painting. I use it for thinning my colors as I need to. But at the final, rather than using a touch-up varnish or something like that, once my painting is dry, I lay a complete coat of the liquid over it. It pulls the colors together, and that it protects it enough to let it dry. And if you want to later on, put a coat of Damar varnish over it to really make it nice, fine. But wait a while. Wait. I've heard of artists who wait 6 months before the painting is completely dry. You're just going to have to judge by yourself. If you paint very heavy and an impasto, lay out the paints, well, then you're going to have to be worried about a lot of other things too, whether or not. And that is something you can see on my website later on. I have some stuff out there where you paint fat over lean or lean over fat. But at this point, don't worry about it. We're painting basically very thin, so that painting should be dry relatively soon. With the liquid, it speeds up the drying a little bit. If you want to really speed up the drying some more, get a cobalt dryer. Dangerous stuff, don't mess with it too much unless you really know what you're doing. Or use a little bit of a Japanese dryer, but use it sparingly, because if you have a nice layer of paint on there, if you put too much drying on it, first of all, it discolors it, and secondly, it'll crack real soon. So if you can avoid all this stuff, just go with what you got in front of you. Don't get too technical. Let's just enjoy painting for a while. Anyway, my first brush is the number 12. And what I do is I go into my reflection color. I've mixed it up on my palette here as well. So what we're going to do is we're just going to lay a color node in here in the reflection of the sky. And also, we're going to, remember when I was talking about maybe some clouds in the sky? Well, I may as well take care of that right now. There might be some clouds in there, maybe even some more light. Just lay it in there and brush it. Reflection is going to run down. So we have established the light area here. So now I'm going to go to my other brush, and now we need to establish the light area in the fog and in the color behind the trees. So I'm working with a little smaller brush. And what would go there, remember when I said, well, you know, whatever is hit by the sunlight, it's going to have yellow in it. So we're exaggerating a little bit on this, but what I'm going to do is these are my areas that are going to be directly affected by the sunlight. And if you're not sure, take a little bit of the yellow and brush it in there with it. Now, see, actually what we're doing right now, we're kind of working abstract. You know, you have, and we're not really making any commitment. We know what the area is going to be that we're going to paint. So that we've committed on. But as far as the colors are concerned, you know, we don't have to worry about that right now. So we know this is my light area. This is the second lightest area. Later on, it's going to balance out a little more. This is going to get a little lighter because we're going to bring in a little more sunlight that bounces around in there somewhere. And maybe I'll just take a little bit right now and put it in. So there, we got that. I'll clean out the brush quick. If you have enough brushes handy, but not a lot of times what I like to do is I take the brushes and I have several brushes of the same size for different colors. Speed up the painting process a little bit. But for the sake of working the way we're doing it right now, let's just clean the brushes out. And I use a mixture of turpentine, just not a paint thinner, but a turpentine, and kerosene. You're probably wondering, well, I got kerosene. Well, I'll tell you what kerosene will do. With kerosene, it's an oily substance, and it will keep your bristles nice and soft. After each day when I'm done painting, I go to the sink and I take a liquid soap, or I take a ivory soap, a bar, and wash out all my brushes. It's a process that you want to get into. It prolongs the life of the brushes, and you know it's a good habit to get into. I've been doing it for that many years. I don't even pay much attention to it anymore. It just comes automatically. You know, day is over, I go wash my brushes. My wife don't like it too well. I mess up the sink, so I got to scrub the sink too. Anyway, so now we're going to go ahead and start working on our distant pine trees. And that will in turn also give you an idea of how the water is going to progress. So I'll go from here. I have already mixed the color on my palette. And now you bear in mind, you're painting in the local color. Now what I like to do is I like to keep the areas where the sunlight is now going to hit the pine trees, the tops of them or the sides of them, whatever. I like to keep them unpainted. But also, remember now, this is the middle value. So I start out over here, and I'm going to start laying in the local color of the pine tree. Now this is all the color that is not directly affected by the sunlight, but it also establishes the different values. Now what I like to do from here to here, I like to progressively get a little darker. I'm underneath that because there is another pine tree right here that is a little more in the foreground, so that is going to be a little darker too. So remember when we mixed up the little variation of the local color a little darker? You know, we'll bring that in here. And right now we're just going to kind of wash it in so we can see, you know, where our different values are going to be. Well, these are all going to be the pine trees. And we have, now as you noticed, I'm not going to put anything down here right now. Wait with that for later on. We'll get into that. But also now we have to now come forward a little more, and we're going to go into the lighter area here. Now, reason for that being, again, it's kind of the rule of thumb. Light against dark, dark against light. Very simple, just like sunlight has yellow in it, shadow has blue in it. One of those things. So what I'm trying to accomplish here is I'm going to go from a dark area into a lighter area, but also now I'm going to bring in a little more of the atmosphere color into the green, because like I said earlier, there are a few of the pine trees that are actually sitting farther back yet. So that's why we're going to need some lighter areas and some darker areas. Well, okay, before we're going to go on with this painting, let's step back for a minute and go back over what we've worked with so far. Now remember, we laid out the palette. It was an ultramarine blue, cadmium red medium, yellow ochre, cadmium yellow medium, and white. Now, we also then mixed the darks for the foreground and the local color for the foreground. Then we mixed the distant ground, which was across the water. We have, again, the darks, the local color. We have the local color and the lighter area for the pine trees. We created a medium value for the rocks that were there, and also some of the highlights. And we created the light for the reflection from the sky in the front of the water. We also created atmosphere. Remember, this is what we're going to need in order to get into the painting a little farther. We did also a fog, and that overall made up the palette that we worked with so far. So now in the next session, as we continue on, I will give you a lot more information about the loons and so on. And I hope so far this has really helped you in some way. If you, for any reason, want any more information, you can go to my website at dirkhansen.com and contact me there or leave a message, and I certainly will get back to you. So let's just go on and go to the next segment, and we continue on with the painting and finish it off.